This is your reminder that the BBC has yet to address the consistent transphobic leanings in its news coverage, and while the team behind Doctor Who is not connected to this in any way since this is a BBC-owned property, I'm going to keep pointing it out until the problem gets resolved. Links in a pinned comment below if you don't know what I'm talking about. I'll stop saying it when it stops being a problem.
Oh, Chris. You thought I was done with you, didn't you? I haven't done a video like this in a long time. I don't mean a Doctor Who ranking. I do those semi-regularly. I mean one based around a specific writer. Years ago, I think possibly before I came out, definitely before me presenting like this was standard on this channel, I did separate videos for Moffat and RTD for the works they had produced at that time, for what I thought were their 10 best and their 10 worst. I considered doing that with Chibnall, but I don't want to do 2 videos with Chibnall. And honestly, if I ever revisit the RTD or Moffat lists, I'll want to do what I'm doing here, which is rather than do a top 10 and a bottom 10, I'm going to rank everything. Everything that Chibnall wrote, I'm going to rank, sort of. So 2 points of clarification on this. The first being, I am not including anything that he was a co-writer on. I am only looking at the stuff where he is the sole credited writer. This is because when we start talking about stuff that he is listed with another writer, I don't know how much of what is good or bad about it is his contributions, how much of it is the other person's contributions. It gets real messy real quick. And the point of this video is to talk specifically about Chibnall's work. Now, the other thing is, when I say all of it, I mean all of it. This is not a rank of Chibnall's era. This is a rank of all his work, including what he wrote under other showrunners and what he wrote for Torchwood. Oh boy, Torchwood. We'll deal with that when we get there. But as a result, there's a lot of these, and I don't know how much detail I'm going to go into each of them because we got a lot to cover. So we might as well get started. Although before I can give you the bottom rank, because we're going to start at the bottom, work our way up, I do have to cop to the fact that this bottom ranking might have been the most difficult one, because there were 2 specific things. I'm like, one of these is the bottom and the other one is the next one. Trying to figure out what order to put them in was really hard, because basically I had one that is, I think, the single most inept script that has ever been done for the revival era of Doctor Who, full stop. But it's not that the ideas are flawed, it's just the script is a disaster. But then there's another one where the ideas involved, I'm like, why would you do that? And even if I accepted that that was a good idea, why would you do it in this way? So I had to make a decision. Do I put at the bottom the thing that is just inept writing, just on the basic fundamentals, like how was this allowed to be filmed? And one in which, just at its core concepts, these don't work, even if the nuts and bolts writing is better. Well, we're going to get to the order I put them in. You ask me another day, I might do it the other way around. But for now, let's start at the bottom. And your final reminder, I do count 2-parters as one story. So that means we've got 29 to go through. Number 29, Ascension of the Cybermen and the Timeless Child. Here's the thing. In and of themselves, the core ideas that I don't like about the Timeless Child, which again, my issue is not really so much that it messes with the lore. My big issue is that it makes the Doctor inherently special in a way that I don't like the character to be. I want the Doctor to be special because of things the Doctor has chosen to do, not because of stuff that is innate about them that they have no actual agency in, which is just fundamentally what this plot twist of the Doctor being some other entity that the Time Lords got their regeneration from. Like, it just makes the Doctor into an even more special figure, and by virtue of nothing that the Doctor did, just by something that the Doctor is. I just don't like that. I just don't. But beyond that, there are just some horrifying plot turns in this, specifically the fact that Gallifrey is destroyed. That actually at this point is my biggest problem with this, and not just because it completely undoes the victory of the Day of the Doctor, it reverses very specifically the fact that that was about saving children, and Chibnall wiped out Gallifrey again, which means Chibnall made the decision, nah, let's kill those kids. That, honestly, is probably my single biggest problem with this. But there's also just a lot of basic storytelling fails. The presentation of the flashbacks of Brendan and how that gets integrated makes no sense. And even across these two episodes that are directly connected is not even consistent in what it is that's even going on. I've gone on full rants about this before, but it's questionable at best ideas presented really, really badly. Number 28, the Battle of Rancor av Kolos. This is the one that I think is the single most inept script that has ever been filmed for Doctor Who, at least since the start of the revival, if not the entirety of it. Because this thing, it's not even an exaggeration on my part for me to say it feels like a first draft. It is literally a first draft. Chibnall admitted to that because a whole bunch of the writers that he brought on for his first series hadn't worked on Doctor Who, and some of them hadn't even really worked in television at all before. So he had to work with them to massage their scripts and be sure that they were going to come out in a format that would work. But that meant he had less time to work on his own script. And the man turned in a first draft. There are so many things that just, why? What? So many ideas that aren't even bad ideas, but you literally do nothing with it. How about the fact that this planet, affects people's mental states? That literally never factors into the plot at any point. Not once. It gets brought up and it's a neat idea. It literally never happens. So why is that even here? The Ux, and they can make things like, wait, who are these people? Why should we care? Are we going to establish anything? No, we're not. Oh, let's try and make the guy with teeth in his face into a big villain. Why? He wasn't that interesting in the first dang place. Oh, let's make it a revenge story for Graham. Graham got over his grief. That was part of what It Takes You Away was him moving on. And now you're immediately going to yank him back into this. It's just so inept. And most of these things, not all of them, because it's Chibnall, but at least some of these things would have been ironed out with just, a second draft. Number 27, arachnids in the UK. Actually, I told a small lie before. It wasn't just the bottom two. 27 and 26 I went back and forth on as well. We'll get to 26 in a little bit, but for 27, it's arachnids in the UK. And it is a bare bones idea. That's not the problem. But it's a bare bones idea done poorly. Giant spiders. Okay, you going to use that concept to do anything interesting? No. We're going to have a Trump analog character. Why? Because Trump. He's not adding anything to the story. Yeah, but Trump, though. And the Doctor's going to get on a moral high horse about the fact that this guy wants to shoot the spiders when the Doctor still plans to kill them, or plans to kill them through suffocation, and acts as if that is a more merciful thing, or in any way, any morally different from what this other guy wants to do. It's not. The morals in this one are really, really out of whack. And not so much what it is the Doctor decides to do. It's not like the Doctor has never decided to take lives of alien beings before. That's been happening since very early into the show, way back in the classic era. But the fact that she gets on a moral high horse about it when that's literally what she's planning to do. What? The one thing that this has going for it is the scenes of Graham going back to his apartment and Grace isn't there. Those are good. This at least has some good stuff. Unlike the following. Number 26. The Legend of the Sea Devils. Yeah, I'm not sure I could name you a single good aspect of this. I guess maybe the last conversation between the Doctor and Yaz is okay. It's not earned properly because they didn't build that relationship very well. They were banking on the shipping of fans to do all the legwork for this thing. They didn't actually do much on screen really at all. But that is really kind of it. And even that I barely am going to count. So if I think this thing has pretty much no good in it, why is it not as low as arachnids in the UK? Well, because, the bad isn't as bad. The bad in this is it's just blundering along. It's just boring. Nothing really interesting happens. Its major sin is the fact that it's a historically set thing with a real life historical figure, but then it invents a historical figure to do all the actual cool stuff, which is doubly frustrating given that the actual historical figure they included was a woman, but then they made up a man to do the cool stuff instead. What? Moving on. Number 25. Cyberwoman. Torchwood makes its debut on this list. And the thing is, I can actually have fun with this thing. It's kind of camp. I'm not sure how much this episode knew it was camp. Torchwood, especially in its first series, really did not seem to understand just how sophomoric it was. It really thought it was doing something, but so much of that first series I'm watching going, okay. And Cyberwoman, I can get a laugh out of it. I don't quite want to call it so bad it's good, but there is a camp fun to it. It doesn't realize that, though, and it isn't leaning into it. It's just this weird story with like a major heel turn, or apparent heel turn at least, from a character who we really should have gotten to know a heck of a lot better if this was going to have any meaning at all. But the show hadn't really done much with Yanto. He was just the coffee boy up to that point. Now, like, oh, look, he's betrayed the team. Like, I barely knew him at that point. It was ill-timed. It was poorly done. It's okay for a laugh. Number 24. The Halloween Apocalypse. Oh, Flux. You know, I got so much crap for saying that this episode wasn't good when it aired. Everyone jumped down my throat at the fact that, like, well, it's the first part of a more serialized series. There's going to be 6 episodes. You can't judge it now. I can, and I will, and I did, and I was right. So the sins of the Halloween Apocalypse are multitudinous. Because, first of all, it is trying to do way too much. It's trying to introduce a new character, introduce all these other new things, introduce a bunch of stuff that is not even going to slightly pay off until significantly later, and just cramming it all into a first episode that doesn't even have a core central narrative for all these things to circle around. We've got the Doctor and Yaz looking for Carvanista, but we have barely any idea who that is. Suddenly he kidnaps Dan, a character who we just met and don't have investment in yet. But then, ooh, wait, the Santarins are showing up. Oh, wait, no, there's this woman who finds the Doctor, and there's weeping angels involved somehow. Oh, and wait, there's these skull people, and all these things introduced with no framework, no meaning, and they will barely get meaning later. And even when we find it out, there wasn't a reason to cram all this stuff introduced here in the beginning. So much of this could have been put off. So much of this could have been flatly cut. And it wouldn't have made any difference. It wouldn't have made it worse. It might even have helped. This thing is a disaster of a kickoff for a story. It fumbles its way through with no narrative cohesion or flow whatsoever, and the later problems with Flux just make this all the worse. Number 23, the Saranga Conundrum. This is another one of those instances where I'm not sure there's anything that bad in it, at least not that egregious. Danged if I can think of anything good in it. About the only thing that I've got is there's the Doctor character, not the Doctor, but a Doctor character on this ship. And his interactions with the Doctor are actually pretty interesting and some of the better character work that the 13th Doctor gets. But once he's gone, because he doesn't last long, there really is nothing here. The monster is too cute to be threatening. The CGI isn't great, so that doesn't even really work. The idea of like, oh, this cute thing, but it's dangerous. Like, they're not playing it properly for comedy, and it's undercutting the sense of danger. The entire thing kicks off with the Doctor just literally having all of them step on a landmine, and then they just happen to be on a ship that's in trouble. Like, it is the epitome of contrived writing, and it just goes through the motions, and it's impossible to invest in. Number 22. The Vanquishers. Hello again, Flux. We talked about the beginning. Let's talk about the end. Closure? What's that? I don't know. Don't ask Chibnall. He's not going to be able to tell you. Let's just wrap up these villains and not have it be entirely clear what it was they were even trying to accomplish. Let's introduce this idea of the malevolent concept of time, which is never going to come back, and I barely understood what the heck it was doing. Let's do all of this stuff with this hinting of, oh, the Doctor's memories, and then she just drops them in the TARDIS and does nothing. Like, this is part of why the Timeless Child is as low as it is, because if Chibnall had actually done a single damn thing with the concepts introduced in the Timeless Child, maybe I wouldn't have ranked that as low, but ultimately he didn't. He did all that and did nothing with it. And what's more with this episode is the one that establishes just how much of the universe is destroyed. It's like a third of the universe is freaking gone, and Chibnall never addresses that. It would take RTD to address the fact that that even happened in Wild Blue Yonder. Why are you doing any of this, Chris, when you don't intend to actually build stories from it? Number 21, Exit Wounds. Back to Torchwood, the Series 2 finale. Okay, this could have maybe been okay. There is one overriding problem. There's a bunch of smaller problems, but I've only got so much time, so let's deal with the major overriding one. This hinges on a twist villain. Spoilers. It's Jack's brother, his little brother Gray, who only gets introduced as a concept in this season, so this honestly has almost no meaning whatsoever. We don't know who the heck this guy was, and all we get are a couple of stories from Jack about what Gray meant to him. We have no investment in this betrayal whatsoever, and it is ultimately let down by the fact that if you are going to introduce somebody like this where the point of the villain is to really twist the knife into the heroes and you are banking on the impact he has on them, you need somebody with good charisma who you buy the impact of this person showing up. And the actor they got is so bland. He is so bland and so boring and cannot deliver a charismatic line worth a darn. I don't usually like to rib into actors. I tend to focus on writing and tend to point out, well, the writing is the problem and the actors did the best they could. Maybe this actor is doing the best that he could, but the best that he could lacked the core elements that were needed to ever make this character work. And it's all the more infuriating because you had James Marsters right there. You had a charismatic actor who you could have just made his guy the villain, but instead you introduced this nothing of a character and try and put emotional weight on it, and who frickin' cares? And as a quick addition before we move on, yes, I'm aware I did not address the character deaths that happened in this episode because they're not especially well done, and in fact their presence here undermines some of the good stuff of an episode we're going to talk about later. Number 20, Survivors of the Flux. Yeah, some more Flux stuff. This is just connective tissue episode. The only reason it's not lower down is because it doesn't really do any of the massive egregious stuff that Flux does overall. Most of the worst of that is contained, well, honestly, in the finale, but a decent amount of it set up in the first one. But it's just connective tissue. That's all this episode is. And I know some people might say it's unfair for me to judge the individual episodes of Flux. I should be judging it as a whole because it's serialized. I mean, you count two-parters as one story. Why don't you do Flux as one thing? If I did Flux as one thing, the whole thing would have been even lower than we're already talking right now. So I'm doing this story a favor by breaking it up. Number 19, Day 1. Torchwood's second episode. Here's a shocker. This was better than I remembered it. I did not rewatch all of these, but I did rewatch the Torchwood episodes because I hadn't seen those in a very long time, and I needed to double check my instincts on those. The stuff actually on Doctor Who, even the stuff I haven't watched in a while, I've watched at least 2 or 3 times, so I was still confident in my assessment of. Day 1, my memory was way worse than the actual episode is. It's still not good. I think the reason that I thought it was even worse was I had ascribed some of the stuff that happens in the first episode to this one as well, i.e. so much of the core cast being completely unlikable. Owen being the biggest offender of that, but honestly, early on, pretty much none of them were likable. And most of that stuff is actually the previous episode. This one's still bad, though, because this is the sex gas monster. And boy, this episode really just makes the point that I mentioned before of how sophomoric Torchwood is. How much it wants to be mature, but it is mature in the most immature way possible. Oh, look, we say and people are having sex and oh, that woman just had an orgasm that killed a guy. Aren't we adult? Like, no. This feels like this was written by a 13-year-old, both in terms of the concepts in it and the actual skill of the writing involved. Number 18, 42. I've got one change that could have made this great. Ditch the monster. The situation and the ticking clock and the fact that this is being presented as happening in real time is plenty. It's plenty. They're in a decaying orbit around a sun. That's wonderful tension. Why is there a monster here? Why is there a monster that just goes, burn with me, and this mask that just feels like it's trying to recreate something like the timeless, no, not the timeless child, the empty child, not the timeless child, the empty child with the whole mask and the are you my mummy, oh, it's faceless and it says a thing. Like, it doesn't help the story in any way whatsoever. The fact that this thing has a monster in it. In fact, it drags it down massively. This has a core idea and a setup that could have been a really awesomely tense story just about a deadly situation. Get the monster out of this. Number 17, End of Days. Yeah, Torchwood didn't do finales very well early on, did it? End of Days is the Series 1 finale, and there's a big monster. The CGI doesn't sell it. It hasn't been properly built up to. We have a human villain who's actually way more intriguing, but he's just there to bring about the big giant monster that you can't emotionally invest in whatsoever because it has no big personality. It's just a big roaring monster. Like, Doctor Who related stuff can do big roaring monsters and have them work. The Beast comes to mind because the Beast bears more than a little resemblance to Abaddon, who is the monster in this particular thing. But, the Beast had a personality. The Beast had a plan. The Beast had interactions. This thing just stands and roars until it tries to kill Jack, and then it dies. Okay. Number 16, The Power of Three. This one is a hair's breadth away from being good. At least good, if not great. Because honestly, its core concepts are so good. Like the idea of the slow invasion of these things that just show up and everyone's nervous about them. Unit is studying them. Everybody's studying them. Oh, what are these things? But then they just don't do anything. And they wait so long that people just stop paying attention. It's a paperweight. It's the cube, whatever. Who cares? That idea alone is real interesting. And the Doctor being stuck waiting for things to happen and being bored out of his mind, that's great too. Wow, the ending completely drops the ball on this. Now, I've heard more than a few times that people blame the actor who played the villain, like he refused to do his lines or stuff like that. I've tried to track that down. The only source I've found for that was the director of the episode. No one else has corroborated this. And from what I can tell, that director had some kind of history with that actor anyway. I'm not going to say definitively that he was just spinning nonsense because he had a grudge against the guy. I'm just saying that nobody other than this one guy, despite the fact that there was an entire set worth of people who could have witnessed what this guy was doing, only one person has ever claimed this. No, I'm going to assume that what's on screen was written on the page, and what was written on the page just completely falls apart into nonsense and meaninglessness and who the hell is this guy and why should I care? And more to the point, another reason why I'm not going to blame the actor is it's super consistent with problems with later Chibnall scripts. It's a villain that comes out of nowhere and means nothing and tried to bank as a super big deal when there was no reason to do that, and it doesn't help the story. He keeps doing that. So yeah, I believe that's actually what was in the script. Number 15. The Woman Who Fell to Earth. It's fine. It's fine. Like, as we're getting more into the middle range here, there's going to be two flavors of things in this range. There's going to be flavors of things that are mixes of good and bad elements that kind of cancel each other out. That's basically what Power of Three was. And things where Yeah, there's nothing really that wrong with it, but also there isn't really that much that's very good. Like, I like Grace, but then she dies. The companions get established well enough. I like the Doctor making her own Sonic. That's a good moment, but it's not an amazing moment. The highs aren't that high, and the lows aren't that low. Like, there's still lows, though. I don't really think that Tim Shaw is that compelling of a villain. There is some of the early displays of Chibnall's needless cruelty, including an incident that I cite repeatedly with a elderly guard who gets killed for literally no reason, because we've already established that this alien is killing people indiscriminately. But first we have to establish that this old guard has a family and grandkids who are going to miss him, and then we kill him. Why? Why is any of that there? There's a handful of like decent visuals, pretty good moments, just not enough to pull it any higher than this. Number 14, Spyfall, both parts. This is another case of the good and the bad canceling each other out. Because honestly, part 1 is good. It's got a nice steady build. It's evoking that James Bond feel that, like, does it need to be there for the story to work? No, but it's just fun. And it has some good guest stars. That reveal of Sacha Dhawan as the Master is great. I love that. And our first look at these aliens where we don't know what their deal is, but they're just this white glow, and it has this reverberating effect. Like, that's cool and otherworldly, and I really dig the heck out of that. And then we get to part 2, and we lose track of the aliens, and we focus in on this tech guy who is not very compelling as a villain. To whatever degree he was interesting, it's completely boiled down to he apparently has mother issues. Okay, who cares? The Master and the Doctor go time hopping. We have some very questionable actions by the Doctor when they are in the World War II time frame. We do have some interesting historical figures who show up prior to that, but the second half is just a really weak finish from a really strong setup. And that's why this story as a whole just lands where it does. Number 13, The Ghost Monument. I am a soft apologist for this. I don't think it's amazing. I do like it, though. I think it's fun. I think that it has the energy of the moments that I like most from Chibnall's run. I think that the whole thing where this is effectively a race against time, and you have these contestants, trying to win stuff, and the Doctor and the Commanders they just happen to end up being caught up in this. Like, that's fun. I really like the guy who's running the thing. I like him as a villain because especially of how completely unfazed by the Doctor he is. And at the very end where the contestants demand like, oh, and you need to help them too. And he just goes, no, and vanishes. Like, that's great. I love that. And even just the moments of the Doctor reconnecting with the TARDIS are good. And the reveal, while I don't like this interior TARDIS design, especially, the reveal is still well handled and well built up to. It's still kind of clunky, and the things that I like aren't really the central things, and the main central thing is just kind of plodding along, and it's functional. I kind of like it, though. Number 12, Countryside. Torchwood episode, and one of 2 episodes that actually kept me going through early season 1, because I was struggling. And I saw this and it's not amazing. It's actually pretty basic. And if you're anything like me, you called the twist of it pretty early. It's still decently executed though, because it's Torchwood. They deal with aliens. They're going out in the country. Something's going on. Well, there must be aliens afoot. No, it's just people. And those people might be the most terrifying thing that this group has encountered. That's a solid idea, and it's solidly executed. It's a little bit kind of got Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibes, which could be a positive for you. For me, that's kind of a neutral thing. I don't really like that kind of horror movie, but it is evoking that pretty decently. This is one of the moments where the more over-the-top gore aspects of the show actually work in its favor. It helps the story that these people are as brutal as they are because it makes the point better. It's solid. It's not amazing, but it's solid. Number 11, Revolution of the Daleks. There's a fair amount of stuff here that I like. I like the continuation of the previous story. I've said before, I like the fact that Chibnall made his holiday special sort of a loose Dalek trilogy. I actually rather like that. This is very much a middle chapter within that trilogy. Bringing back our Trump analog, didn't need that. He doesn't help. Bringing back Jack, that was more fun. Issues with the actor aside. I'm not addressing that here. That's actually true of the actor who plays the Trump analog as well. So we're going to set all that aside right now. But the general idea of Daleks infighting, Dalek Civil War stuff, like, I know some people feel it's really played out and like, oh, and the Daleks are fighting each other again. Like, I like that stuff. I'm sorry, I do. No, I'm not sorry. I'm not apologizing for that. I enjoy that kind of stuff. I think it's decently handled. I really wish that the episode did a hell of a lot more with the Daleks being stand-ins for, or like assisting the police and local authorities. There's so much more meat on the bones that the show just doesn't deal with. Yeah, it would have been nice, but it's still fun. Number 10, Dinosaurs on a Spaceship. It's just a good time. Is it deep? Is it meaningful? Is it doing anything new or exciting? No, but it's dinosaurs on a spaceship. Like, could you ever have a title that more clearly lays out the thing's intentions? Not just summarizing the literal plot of the thing, but also just saying out the title is the energy that this thing has. And you're either on board with that or you're not. And I am. I like the robots. The bigger robots, they're very Douglas Adams. I actually kind of like the villain in this as well, and I like the way the Doctor interacts with him. I like Rory's dad. This is just a fun, rollicking time, and I am certainly not above that. Number 9, War of the Santarins. If there wasn't the Flux stuff in here, this would be even higher. Because I like the Santarin stuff in here a lot. I mean, flatly, just the image of a Santarin on horseback. The fact that he flat out says, I wanted to ride a horse. Great! That's wonderful. The idea that, like, the people in this time just think they've always been fighting the Santarins. That's an interesting idea. I just think this is one of the better uses of the Santarins we've had, honestly, since they were reintroduced in the series way back in Series 4 with Tennant. It's just a good, solid use of them. I enjoy it. It's fun. It has a couple of clever ideas. It has some really entertaining performances in it. I think it pulled an interesting historical figure. This is solid stuff that is dragged down by the stuff that connects it to Flux. Number 8, The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood. The reintroduction of the Silurians, and also kind of a soft retelling of their first story, although with a better outcome. They have a legitimate claim to the planet. The Doctor really just wants to prevent war. Like, humans didn't know that there were these lizard people living beneath the ground, but, you know, what do? How do we solve this? How do we resolve this with minimal bloodshed when there are people on both sides who are going to exacerbate it and make it worse, even though in some cases they are well-meaning and they're doing so? It's a solid take on that. And it is well-paced over its 2 parts. Like, the kid characters, but kid's more of a plot device, if we're being completely honest. And this, honestly, just works. It does exactly what it sets out to do, and it does it pretty well. Number 7, Resolution. Another mixed bag, but one where the good stuff does a lot to pull it up. Like, mainly the bad stuff here is the stuff between Ryan and his dad. It's not particularly well handled, but more to the point, it's not well integrated. It's not thematic to the other stuff going on. It feels, frankly, like a distraction most of the time that it comes up. And it's not even that poorly handled, but it just doesn't really have any business being here. It doesn't fit with the story being told. And these 2 elements just don't blend at all. But then we've got the story of this Dalek, this one lone Dalek, the reconnaissance Dalek. I love the reconnaissance Dalek. This thing is great. The idea that it can latch onto somebody's back and puppet them and that voice, and she can't control her arm. Oh, that thing it's a fantastic concept, and it's one of the few times that I can say of Chibnall, that was a good concept, and you did it well. So many times I can go, that was a decent idea, but what? No, he did it well. There's other issues with this. We have another instance of his cruelty where let's kill a random guard. This time we'll establish that he's gay with a boyfriend right before we kill him, even though he exists for no reason other than dying. Yeah! Whew. The good is really good in this one, though. Number 6. Once Upon Time. You know, I was shocked rewatching this one how much I liked it. This is, I'd say, the strongest part of Flux. For the record, Village of the Angels isn't on here because Chibnall wasn't the sole writer credited, so don't tell me I missed it. That's why it's not here. It's overrated anyway. But Once Upon Time is so much better than I gave it credit for. On my first time watching it, I was just like, this is nonsense. And it is kind of dragged down by the fact that the overarching story that it's in doesn't work. But this dips into some more surreal pacing, some more sci-fi of the mind, imagery and moments, and playing with the Doctor's perceptions of memory and reality. And then you've also got some of those moments also for some of the companions, and they actually play pretty well. I'd also say this is the best showing for our Skullface villains. I can't even remember their names now. The Skull-faced villains, I'd say that this episode is their best showing. I don't really like them. I don't think they work other than a real striking visual. This is a case where it's not the performer's fault. They are doing the most with what they've got. They're just not very well written. But this is the episode where they work the best. And so the Flux elements are actually shockingly dragging this one down the least, I'd say, of any of the episodes in the Flux storyline. And once I knew what it was and I accepted that I didn't like Flux overall, and I sat down for a rewatch on this and just went, okay, I know I don't like this series. Is there any good in here? I found way more than I expected. Number 5, Fragments. Back to Torchwood. This is kind of the flashback episode. We get flashbacks to see origins of most of the members of Torchwood. We get significant flashbacks, especially for Owen and for Tosh, but also like for some of the other characters as well. And this is pretty well done. I mean, its setup is honestly just an excuse for these flashbacks, but that's all it honestly needs to be. This could have been really meaningful. I say could have been because, spoiler for Torchwood Series 2, 2 of these characters are going to be dead by the end of the next episode anyway. So in the context of the series that it's in, this feels more like last minute heartstring tugging right before we kill some people than it does deepening a connection so that we can understand and appreciate these characters more going forward. And within this episode by itself, it's not this episode's fault, but in the context of the overall season, especially considering that Chibnall wrote the next episode too, it's a waste. It's a waste of a good episode, because this is a good one. Number 4, Eve of the Daleks, the best of the Dalek trilogy. Why isn't the Doctor Who, just in the history of it, why haven't there been more time loops? I mean, this is just Doctor Who does Groundhog Day, and I love it. And I love the little twist to it, the fact that the loop is shortening each time. So there is still a ticking clock, even though they get to repeat and try things again. The Daleks are remembering some stuff, so some stuff's not going to work the second time. It's fun. It's well built. It's well paced. The supporting characters are okay. There's a couple of iffy things with that, but honestly, it just embraces its core central idea so well, I'm willing to forgive a fair amount. Number 3, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Series premiere for Torchwood Series 2. James Marsters as Captain John Hart. Mwah. He matches Jack Harkness's energy pretty much 1 for 1, just with fewer moral qualms. And given what Jack has done, that should tell you a lot about what John is like. And the two of them, get them in a room together, they bounce off each other so well. It's astounding chemistry. And yeah, is James Marsters basically just channeling Spike from Buffy? Yeah, he is. I don't care. I love Spike. This is so much fun. It's a fun episode with a great entertaining energy anyway. It really did kick off series 2 in a way that goes, this show realizes that being uber serious wasn't really its strength, and it's going to lean into the fun. And ultimately, over the course of the series, it doesn't really, not properly. But boy, did it give me hope when I saw this episode, because this is just a rip-roaring good time with a fantastic villain that I just love. Number 2, The Power of the Doctor. Yeah. I said this was my favorite of the 13th Doctor's stories. Still is. I will default to the descriptor I've used before. This is a really great party. This is a really wonderful celebration and send-off of something that I didn't particularly like. It's like going to a fantastic birthday party and celebration of somebody who you don't actually get along with that much. That doesn't make the party not good, though, because this has that wonderful celebration feel. This has the core moments of Sacha Dhawan's Master, where it solidified that self-loathing that he has, that to me is the key to his depiction of the Master, and a big part of why I like his depiction of the Master. We get a little more time with Joe Martin's Doctor, which I will always be happy for. We get these wonderful moments with the classic Doctors, whether it is on the edge or whatever the heck they called it, or the moments especially between Ace and the 7th Doctor. That was amazing, magical even. The fact that we were able to see them together again and their chemistry, their dynamic, it doesn't falter for an instant. They're so good together. Even the 5th Doctor and Tegan, I don't even like the 5th Doctor that much. That moment still works really well. This is an amazing celebratory episode. Are there logistical plot holes in it? Yeah, absolutely. Are there some things that you had big opportunities you could have done something else with that you didn't like? Oh yeah, no, there definitely are. But it is all feeding into the sense of fun, and it's just so happy to be celebrating the time that we've had with these characters. That, to me, just kind of steamrolls most of the problems. I have too much fun with this for me to put it any lower. It's not Chibnall's best work, though. His best work was on Torchwood, with an episode that I had kind of forgotten, but then I was watching it, and it all came back. Number 1, Adrift. Torchwood tried very hard early on to be mature, but it did it in a very juvenile way. This is legit maturity. This is a hint at the kind of stuff that RTD would be able to do with Torchwood when he would later write Children of Earth, which Chibnall had no involvement in. But Adrift is a somber story of loss, of uncertainty, and of sometimes getting what you want being the worst thing for you. Because it's kind of a cliche in so many stories of missing person, especially if you're dealing with more sort of neo-noir kind of heavy subject things. The idea of I would rather know what happened even if it was something terrible than not know. This story truly challenges that and comes to the conclusion, actually, maybe it would have been better if she didn't know. And to do that and not have it come across as edgelordy, to not have it come across as just knife twisting, to have it come across as a feeling of a mature look at sometimes you think you can handle whatever it's going to be, but you can't. And you can't know in advance what you can't handle. But then you're going to have to carry that burden. You're going to have to live with it, or if you're Gwen, you're going to have to live with the fact that you subjected someone to that. It's a story of loss. It's a story of grief. It's a story of wounds being reopened. It's really, really good. And it is Chibnall's best work on Doctor Who. I would say in some ways it signals the work he would do on Broadchurch. Now, to be fair, I've only seen the first series of Broadchurch. I watched that. It's good. But I did find myself going, why would you ever do a second series of this? And I've not bothered with the other ones. But the writer who made that is the writer who brought us this. Chibnall can be a good writer. Chibnall can also be an infuriating writer. But sometimes he gets it right. That time, he got it real right. There we go! Every episode written by Chris Chibnall, and Chris Chibnall alone, ranked within the Doctor Who universe. I didn't check to see if he ever wrote episodes of the Sarah Jane Adventures. I don't watch the Sarah Jane Adventures. I was a little too old for it. I've tried getting into it. I just can't. So if I missed that, mea culpa on that, I suppose. But those are my thoughts. Depending on how this does, maybe I will do a full rankings of, I guess I'd have to do Moffat, because I'm going to have to wait for RTD to finish again before I can consider doing his stuff. But if this does well enough or people are interested, maybe I'll do this with them later on down the line. Suppose I could look into some of the other writers. I'm not sure if it's going to carry weight for me to, talk about other recurring writers other than ones who have been the showrunner. But in any case, what were your thoughts on any of this? My ranking, my assessment, whatever. Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, don't worry too much about it. Like, share, subscribe. They also help me out, but don't worry too much about that either. What I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You're the council, and I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. Don't give me grief for not putting a full cosplay on. It's still really hot here. The t-shirt for the 13th Doctor is all you're getting. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons. Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Goddess Elida, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Oliver B., Melissa Pedersen, Tarak, The Thing That Goes Doink in the Anime, Gene Foray, Movie Turtle, Ulrich Bogdan, Loki Eris, Melinda Walters, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, White Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Pal Barabajagal, Mira G, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. Oh look, you actually get a face this time and not just butts.